to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
We did it. We made it to episode 2. Does that mean we're like the real deal now? Okay, maybe let's get 10 episodes, then I can chat about it. But still, super happy to get a couple of these in the bag. So thank you to everyone that has checked out the Straight to Video podcast and come back for more. So how is everyone? You all doing good and getting back to some kind of normality, or is it still a bit nuts? One thing I've been liking about this downtime is the creativity from folk out there that I don't think they perhaps have had the chance to do before. And, you know, I think people seem to have a little more time for each other right now. We're not all running around like nut jobs and trying to do a million things. So I think and hope that's been at least a couple of the good things to come out of this. Singer and frontman Rob Wylde is on the show today. We've been good friends since the early 2000s when we got together and formed the band Teenage Casket Company. We had that band for over 10 years, which is kind of a crazy amount of time, at least considering during that time we didn't kill each other. And since we broke up, Rob went on to form MIDNITE CITY. And I gotta salute him. He wasted zero time in taking over, let's say, the melodic rock world. Already 2 albums out there with a third one on the way, along with a crazy amount of touring, not just here in the UK, but Europe, Australia, Japan. That's a real testament to his talent because, hand on heart, he's one of the best songwriters out there in melodic rock and all that kind of thing, so good on him. We've done a lot of shit together, travelled a lot of miles, and Rob's a great storyteller, so it was fun to have a chat and pick his brain about where he grew up and what he was like as a kid. What's cool about Wylde, though, is that there are 2 very different sides to him. There's a guy you see on stage who, not lying, is like the living, breathing example of living out your dreams and sticking to your guns. And then there's the Rob, who very much holds on to the personality, values, characteristics of that kid that grew up in like the northern area of the UK during the 80s. And I don't think a lot of people get to see or hear that side very often. So I'm glad we got to bring that guy out during our chat. It was a fun one. I got to continue to do the housekeeping on the Straight to Video podcast, so if you're enjoying these episodes, please subscribe and follow. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please leave a review or rating. Tell your mates, please tell me what you're liking or what you'd like to hear or what you're not liking. If something's a bit off, please give us a shout. And over the next couple of weeks, I've got some really fun chats on the way from a bunch of people you'll know, but I'm sure there's some stories you've never heard before, so please don't miss out. In the meantime, here's my chat with Rob Wylde, singer of MIDNITE CITY and TIGERTAILZ. Let's start with you telling us about the town you grew up in, because places in the northwest of England, you can't really find somewhere as far removed from the glitz and glamour of the Hollywood Sunset Strip scene, which you've always dreamed about being a part of. There's nothing more black and white in comparison, really.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. It was. I mean, the most rock and roll place to grow up, really. Sort of like, I mean, it was a northern working class market town where sort of like nothing ever happened. You know, nobody really, apart from Peter Kay's. They say Peter Kay's from Chorley, but he's actually not. He's from Bolton. But apart from him, you know, nobody's obviously ever come out of Chorley. Nobody's really done anything. You know, and it was one of those like awful places to grow up. Well, not an awful place to grow up, but in terms of
ordinary.
Yeah, in terms of like being into rock music, and it was just such a not only, I mean, there was nothing to do. It was a really small town. There was one cinema which ended up sort of closing in the mid 80s, and then there was nothing really to do. There was nowhere to go, and it was such a narrow-minded sort of town as well. So it was kind of like, if you any bit different from the norm, I mean, the amount of crap I used to get from people was just unbelievable. Just walking, I mean, I wasn't even dressed up, just walking down the street in a leather jacket. It was just, I would like literally almost like cause car crashes.
Just even simple things, just a leather jacket, not even before you've grown your hair out.
No, just sort of being kind of different and not.
They spotted you immediately. You stuck out like a sore thumb. What was it? Just like grebo?
Yeah, that was sort of the word. Hippie was the other one.
Yeah.
Which I then went into being my nickname at school, and that was a whole other kind of worms. But yeah, getting bullied at school. But yeah, just standing out and getting a lot of grief from people just for kind of looking different.
Did that ever bother you? Because I wouldn't say I was bullied, but once I started growing my hair out, wearing band T-shirts, denim jackets, and so people say, "Oh, hippie," and all this, it never bothered me because I felt like, well, this is me. Did it ever bother you?
No, I was exactly the same. I think that was quite cool because even when I was, because I got bullied really very, very badly at school.
Yeah.
It actually started at the end of primary school, and then it really started bad when you get to secondary school, in a much bigger school, which I could never really understand because, I mean, I started high school in 88, which was, I mean, in the UK, I mean, rock music was really big. I mean, you had, Bon Jovi and Def Leppard, and I mean, even I've been watching a lot of the old Top of the Pops from that sort of era, and even like bands like like Vixen and Wasp, and that weren't particularly they're in the top 40 and stuff. So I could never kind of understand. I was at this school of 500 people, and I was the only little rocker dude. And, so yeah, people really honed it on me. But I was the same. It was kind of I never once thought. Because the obvious thing would have been, right, well, I'll get my hair cut and the bullying would stop instantly. Mm-hmm. But I was just the same as you. I was just like, well, no, I think this is cool. And
you believed in that choice. It's a choice you made sort of thing. And so, you're almost expecting it in a way, perhaps. So perhaps put up a shield to it. Well, fire what you want at me. I don't care because I love this.
Yeah. And I wasn't at school, probably similar to how you probably were at school. Like, I wasn't like the rocker, the tough rocker guy who'd be like, well, come on then, I was always the really shy, sort of insecure, unpopular kind of kid at school. So I was being bullied was added to all that, so it made me feel even worse. But I still refused to kind of bow down to these people because I was, I loved the music I was into, and I thought all the bands looked cool, and I wanted to look like them. So I was just like, well, I'll eventually the bullying. I'd say probably the first 2 years of high school, and then after that, they kind of just left me alone.
Yeah.
And, but I never bowed down to it ever, and it's just something that I sort of believed in it, and I was, I wasn't going to move away from it.
Right.
So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
You kind of got into music pretty early, really, even despite not being directly from a musical family. Your early musical influences could be deemed much more credible than most young people, like Adam Ant, Duran Duran. Do you think that comes from having a slightly older sister?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think she was probably the main. I mean, my mum, like you said, I don't come from an immediate musical family, but when I sort of look back on further back in my family, it's full of musicians, which I didn't discover until probably about 10 years ago. But my mum's cousin was a singer. She had had albums out back in the 60s, and
actually had albums out.
Yeah, she was called Jean. Yeah, she was called Jean Bennett, and she actually had. Not long ago, I was up at my mum's, and she'd actually found the actual vinyl.
That's amazing.
It was really cool to see. I was like, so that's sort of where it's all come from, because she was a singer, and then my granddad's brother was a drummer. So there's definitely like that bloodline of music, but it kind of it went past my mum and dad, really.
Right.
So, but they were always playing music constantly in the house and stuff. And my dad was a big country music fan, and he loved Dolly Parton and John Denver and people like that. But then he also absolutely loved ABBA.
Right.
I still absolutely think they're amazing. And then my mum was into T-Rex, so there was always music. But I think then you add in, like you say, you add in an older sister my sister's 4 years older than me. So she was sort of ahead of where I was, and I was sort of picking up on what she was listening to, really, I suppose.
So when she's 16 and you're 12, you're kind of listening to stuff which I didn't properly get into music till I was like 16 or 17, or at least to the point where you start finding your identity. So when she's 16 and you're 12, you're hearing all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
So you perhaps one of the reasons you got into it a bit more earlier than most people normally would.
Yeah, I think so. That was, a lot of it I discovered, like Adamant was I discovered him from just watching, I think it was Saturday Morning Superstore, I think
Right.
it was, with Mike Reed on a Saturday morning, and he just came on, and I was just like, whoa, and a lot of the stuff I did discover myself, but then Debbie, my sister, she was a massive. She was the reason I got into Duran Duran, which was kind of like the first band that I kind of became a little bit obsessed with, shall we say? And I think if I hadn't had an older sister, I think I probably would have still discovered music, but I think I discovered a lot more, a lot quicker because of her, really.
Much like myself, American pop culture was a massive influence on you, and just about everything on the TV in the 80s was USA based. And I think we all looked on it like this amazing place where it's nothing like where we're from at the moment. So did you all enjoy watching those shows together as a family? Was it like a Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening thing, or was it just something you went and did on your own? Because I used to watch it with my grandparents and uncles and stuff like that, A-Team and all that kind of thing. Was it like a family gathering around the TV? Because it's way before people had TVs in their own bedrooms and stuff like that.
It was kind of a mix of both, really, because I'd watch my kind of I'd always get up early on a Saturday morning and watch cartoons or whatever was on in Saturday Morning Superstore and all that. And then there'd be shows that I would just kind of watch on my own. But we did watch a lot as a family as well. I remember I always, on a Saturday tea time, I would always sit down with my dad and watch the A-Team. Like my mum and sister would always be doing something else, but my dad loved the A-Team.
I think the A-Team was the one which dads and kids kind of
there was something about it that my dad. I think my dad liked it more than I did. And, and that was actually quite a cool time, because I was never really growing up. I was never really all that close to my dad. Really, we didn't particularly do a lot of father-son bonding, really, at all. Really, it's only in later years that I've become really close to my dad, and I think it's maybe because he probably didn't understand what was going on with his son, as in like, well, I think in his head he was probably expecting to raise like a mechanic or a builder or something, and suddenly you've got this little kid that's wanting to be a rock star, So I think it was just a bit confused with who I was and all that. But we'd always watch A-Team together. We'd always watch Knight Rider together on a Friday night, I think that was. And that was sort of like our time together, sort of thing, which looking back was quite nice, really.
Yeah.
But then we'd watch a lot of stuff as a family. But that tended to be more stuff like Dallas and Dynasty and that kind of thing. And then obviously we'd watch like the Generation Game and the Beatles About was another favorite on a Saturday night. We'd all sit around and be cracking up at get some poor guy's Volvo getting crushed by a falling wrecking ball or whatever.
Yeah.
But
see, that's one of the things I really like about your personality, and it isn't a dig in the slightest, because I think it's really charming, because you're so obsessed with like American culture, but then you have some distinctly British traits, such as soap operas, and now you're talking about British game shows and a cup of tea and all that kind of stuff. It's all very British compared to everything else, which is all very much American.
It's a really good observation. I've never really... I think you mentioned that once before, and I never really thought about it, but you're absolutely bang on, because literally we've had this conversation many times. Literally every favorite band of mine is American, apart from, there's Def Leppard, that's it.
Who sound American.
Yeah, that sound American, and Duran Duran kind of in the 80s sounded American. So, and then all the TV shows I grew up on were American, all the films, everything. But that's still very much the case now. But I don't watch any American comedy shows.
No.
I don't actually find American comedy funny at all.
Right.
Which is, as I lived there for quite a while. But I still go back to, in terms of comedy, my head is 100% British, but like I said, everything else is American.
That's got to be in your DNA from where you grew up and your family.
I think
it's got to be.
There's something.
That's your attachment, I guess.
I think there is, because I spent a long time sort of, I suppose, trying to. I think as well, kind of growing up where I grew up, and just sort of having a lot of hassle for looking different, and having a lot of hassle for what I wanted to do. I kind of, when I moved away from home when I was 20, I think I was 20 or 21, I almost wanted to disown where I came from, really, and never really admitted to anybody where I was almost, it sounds weird, but I almost was kind of a bit resentful of where I came from. So if anybody ever asks where I came from, when I first moved here, I actually used to say, well, I'm from here, which was just ridiculous, really. But it's only as I've got older that I kind of like embrace where I've come from, really. Nothing's really changed. It's still the same narrow-minded, kind of like tunnel vision, sort of working class, not a town that it's always been. But I actually quite like it now, whereas for a long time, I absolutely hated where I came from.
It's probably a good thing, because that's what kind of drove you to. It created your personality. It got you out of there. If it had been exciting and comfortable, you'd probably still be there today.
Yeah. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, but I think I kind of knew really young, even when I decided that I wanted to be in a band, and this is what I wanted to do, when I was probably about 6 or 7. I think I knew even then, not really knowing much about the world, I think I knew even then that I would have to, if I wanted to do that, I would have to get away from where I was living, and at the time, I remember, as I got a little bit older, it was, I need to move to Manchester because that's the closest city to, but then I quickly realized that there wasn't really that much of a scene going on there. So that and eventually is what led me to, move to Notts.
Was it scary, that decision?
Yeah.
Or you just knew you had to do it? Or
it was a bit of both, really. It was knowing that, that I definitely, because at the time I'd been in a band as a drummer for about 5 years. And we were based in sort of the Bolton, sort of Manchester area. And that band had just split up after we'd been together about 5 years. And it was one of those kind of moments where I thought to myself, well, this is a perfect opportunity to make, because I've been thinking about making the move for a while. And I thought, this is a perfect opportunity to do it. There's nothing keeping me here. I'm in a dead end job. My band's just split up, which was everything to me at the time. I'm still living at home with my mum and dad. My dad's still giving me a lot of hassle. And I just thought, why not? I'll give it a go. But still, again, I was still very young and naive, and didn't really, obviously, the first time you ever move out of home, it's always, it's scary, because you don't really know how you're used to your mum and dad taking care of everything. And then suddenly I remember moving down and just packing all my stuff up, and I actually moved down. My dad drove me down with my mum in a transit van to where I was going to be living, and I was fine. And we unloaded all the stuff into the house, and then they stayed for about an hour. And then I remember standing on the doorstep waving goodbye to them, and the transit van's going up the street, and I just remember being, at that moment, actually panicking a little bit and thinking, I'm really on my own now. And it was kind of that reality hit that they're going to be 150 miles away from me from now on, and I'm well and truly sort of grown up. And I was at that age, I was very, very immature. I mean, I think I'm still immature now, but I was even more immature then. And suddenly, at that moment, I realized I really have to grow up and have to get a job and pay bills and all the boring stuff before I can even start to think of, chasing the dream or whatever. There was a million things I needed to do before that. And it was quite daunting, really. Yeah.
That's crazy. Can you tell us about how you discovered hard rock and the transition from stealing your sister's Duran Duran tapes to discovering the likes of Europe and Bon Jovi, which I think were the first ones which you kind of got into? Was it simply just seeing them on TV or hearing it on the radio?
It was a bit, actually hearing them on the radio, because, like you said, up until that point, I'd been listening, Adamant and all the pop stuff that was happening, and then got heavily into Duran Duran for a good few years, and absolutely idolized them. I had posters of them all over. That was like the first band where my wall was full of Duran Duran posters, and it became, whenever my sister got Smash Hits magazine, it was always a fight as to who could get the poster out first, and I was just really obsessed with that band. And then I remember hearing Europe on the radio first, which would have been 86 Final Countdown. I remember hearing them because on a Sunday afternoon, me and my sister would always sit in the front room and listen to the top 40 countdown on Radio 1. I don't even know whether they do that anymore. I mean, I'm sure they don't anymore, but
it's on Fridays now,
okay.
I think.
But they used.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. So they do the kind of the countdown, and they play each song. So I suppose it was. I mean, it certainly wasn't number one. So it was probably when it entered the charts. So maybe like number 30 or whatever. And it was in the middle of I don't know. It was like Madonna or Michael Jackson or whoever was before it. And then suddenly this song starts, and I'm just like, what? The drums kick in, and it's just like, what the hell is this? This is like, to me, like the heaviest thing I've ever heard in my life. It was like almost like hearing Slayer or something. It just sounded so different to anything I'd ever heard, and the drum sound was massive, and everything was just what I always loved in all my favorite TV shows and my favorite films. Everything was just OTT, like, everything's to the extreme. The drums, the vocals are massive. It was just, and I remember missing who at the end of the song. I remember kind of mishearing who it was, and I was like gutted because I had no idea. Of course, there was no internet to search who this song was. So then I would just constantly be coming home from school and putting the radio on, hoping that I could hear this song again, because you're not going to hear it anywhere else. And I did. Weeks went by, and then I suppose it must have started climbing the charts. And then I finally found out that it was this band from Sweden called Europe. So I was like, okay, cool. So I think I did the classic, recording it, on the tape deck. I think my dad actually did it because he used to do a really bad job. He used to come in. I used to give him a TDK C90, and he would put it in. And my dad was just him and technology just didn't go hand in hand. So he would usually, I'd shout for him to, come out of the kitchen. I need you to take this song, and he'd get it halfway through, and then he'd stop it half the way, and it was always a disaster. But so I think I ended up having half of the Final Countdown on this cassette.
And half of Fine Young Cannibals or something like that.
Probably Fine Young Cannibals, yeah. She drives me crazy. It was like a Europe Fine Young Cannibals mix. But then I think the first time I actually saw the video, I think was when they actually went to number one. Because I didn't think it was number one I think it was 2 weeks it went to number one. And I remember seeing the video, and then it was just like, it was kind of like the same reaction to when I first heard the song. It was just these guys who, I'd never seen guys that look like that, and being a little bit kind of, I'm only like 9 years old, and I'm kind of like, at one point, I wasn't 100% sure whether Joey Tempest was a girl or not, and this kind of like weird kind of attraction to it in a way, as in like, whoa, I don't really know what's going on here, but it's great, whatever it is. And again, the video was so over the top. I mean, the biggest drum kit on earth is a huge arena stage, the lights, the girls screaming in the audience, Joey Tempest spinning his mic stand, they're doing it. And it was just, to a little kid, it was just, I would just fell instantly in love with it. And I remember that Christmas getting my first, actually going out and buying the Final Countdown cassette.
Where'd you buy your music from in Chorley?
Yeah, good question. There was a Woolworths in Chorley, so there wasn't much in Chorley in terms of in terms of anything, as I said earlier. So there was a Woolworths, which is where I got the Final Countdown from, and where I got a lot of my cassettes from. And then for a very brief period, there was an hour price, but that was probably only there for about a year. So it was mainly Woolworths. And then as I got a bit older, there was a record shop which opened in the High Street, which was actually there for years. Sadly, it's went bankrupt last year, but initially I got all my stuff from Woolworths. So yeah, it was Europe first, and then after that, maybe a month later, I heard Bon Jovi with "You Give Love a Bad Name," and which I like, because to me it just sounded like Europe, and they looked like Europe. At the time, I actually thought they weren't I preferred Europe, but I thought they were cool again, because it was just kind of like, whoa. As obsessed as I am with this band Europe, now I've also got this other band that look and sound like them. So I've got 2 albums to play to death, So yeah, that was my initial kind of step into going from Duran Duran into hard rock.
And then it was a few years after that you finally got to see Europe live, really. And you've mentioned, like, this is the chance. Well, you never expect to see them in the flesh. It's like, that's not going to happen. These guys are people who are on my TV screens and in my headphones. These aren't real people. You're not actually going to go and see them live. It's like, I had a similar thing because I was like into Madonna and stuff like that in the late 80s. And a friend of mine came onto like the local football pitch wearing like a Madonna tour t-shirt. I'm like, yeah, you can actually go and see them live. It just like blew my mind that you could actually go to a concert and see these people.
Yeah, I was the exact same thing. I mean, when I discovered that Europe were playing, I found, again, there was no. I was only let me think. I was 11 when I went to see Europe, so it was about it was March of '89, so it was 3 months before my 12th birthday. So it was actually as a 12th birthday present, like an early birthday present. But back then, yeah, I mean, there was no, like I said, there's no internet. I hadn't at that point discovered Kerrang magazine or Raw or Metal Forces or any of those magazines. So I found out about that concert just because there was, my mum and dad used to get the local Charlie newspaper, which was called the Charlie Guardian, which they'd get every Wednesday. And in the back of it, there was this sort of like advert for this events company where you could buy tickets to whoever you're going to see, and you get coach travel there and back. And it just listed who was playing. So Madonna was probably on there, and Fine Young Cannibals. Whoever was playing at the bottom of this list, it was Europe at the Manchester Apollo. And I just saw this, and I was just like, that's it. I've got to go to this. And my dad just refused to take me. So my mum, just knowing how much I wanted to go, basically said, well, I'll take you. And it was just, looking back on it now, it was probably quite daunting for my mum, because we had to get on this coach full of long-haired rocker guys and chicks with leather jackets and short skirts and everything, and I get on there. I mean, I've got no cool clothes. I don't even own a rock t-shirt. I vividly remember.
Did you try?
No.
Did you like, right, I've got to try and look cool? Did you give it any attempt, or was you still just too young to like go with what I've got on?
I don't think I had any concept of cool of trying to look like them at that age. So I vividly remember I wore like a blue like like a sweatshirt with like footballers on the front. And then I remember my mum was wearing like a green anorak. We get, the bus arrives and we get on, and you got all these, everyone looks cool. All the guys look cool. All the girls look amazing. And there's me and my mum, sat on the bus with all these rocker people. But when we actually got there, it was the same thing. Like you said, it was, I couldn't actually get my head around the fact that even though I was at the concert, like I was watching a video or I was watching them on TV, I couldn't get the idea that I could actually walk down to the front of the stage and actually touch one of them. I just couldn't, because they were such almost like godlike figures, that they were almost like superhuman beings, like, and I don't know whether it's sad really, because I don't think kids have that anymore. I don't know whether that's an old fashioned. To me, that's amazing, you know. I had a few, I had a million favorite bands, but I'd say there was only probably about 5 bands where I had that kind of just in total awe of these human beings, that, you know, I just couldn't get my head around the fact that I was actually watching the real thing. It was amazing.
What a trial of fire as well for you at that age, and also for your mum just being thrown in the lion's den in a way.
Yeah, it really was, because I remember it, like I said, it was the Manchester Apollo, which is only it's not that big of a venue really. It's just like an old theatre, you know. I think it holds about 2,500 people. I think it actually at one point in time was a cinema years and years. I think that's how it started. But to me, as an 11-year-old kid, I mean, it might as well have been Madison Square Garden. You know, I walked in and it was just like the biggest place I've ever, you know, seen in my life. And there's me and my mum. And what's really funny about it is they were unbelievably loud. Unbelievably loud. Obviously, as a kid, anything would be loud. But I later read, many years later, that the actual volume that they play at was louder than Motorhead play at. And it was I've got it somewhere. I've got like a stack of old Kerrangs, and there was a review, not for the Manchester gig, but they played at the Hammersmith Odeon a couple of nights later. And the actual title of it was louder than Motorhead. And this reviewer was just saying he's never been to a concert that was that loud. So I was thinking, you know, talk about, like, say, straight in at the deep end. My poor mum, you know, went home, you know, with ears ringing for about 3 weeks after the gig, you know. But she loved it as well, though. That was a great thing. She absolutely thought it was amazing. So
you don't know what she told your dad when she got back home?
Oh yeah, I've got no idea. I remember getting home, and I was just in in this really amazing little world in my head, just reliving it all. I remember just going to bed. I couldn't go to sleep for hours. It was just going over it and over it. But what she said to my dad, I don't know. She was probably saying, "That's it. I'm never taking him to another gig again." But to me, she was like, "Oh, it was amazing," you know. So
was you at school the next day?
No, thankfully, because it was it actually fell on Easter Sunday, the actual gig. So yeah, right. I was off school the next day. It was Easter Monday. So yeah, I mean, I'd spent the next sort of 2 or 3 weeks just constantly going over and over it in my head, and it was just great. I mean, I didn't take edit, you know, we didn't take a camera or anything like that. So it was just, you know, there's no YouTube footage of it. It was just all up in here, you know, and I just kind of go over it in my head, and it was just an amazing experience, really.
On the path that you're on now, I mean, you're seeing success with Midnight City and stuff like that. You're playing good venues. You're going all over the world. Do you ever speak to your mum about that night? She can see the kind of, not the transition, but the journey you've been on from that one night, and that's kind of brought you to this place now. She ever mentioned anything like that?
Yeah, we actually talked quite a bit about it, and because my mum was always she was always very aware of what I wanted to do from being a little kid, and was always, whereas my dad was very unsupportive of it, and just didn't understand it, and definitely didn't encourage what I was doing. My mum was the exact opposite. And she always she just knew that it was what my passion was and what I wanted to do with life and everything. So she was always behind me. But we often have this conversation about, you know, if I hadn't gone to that concert, would I have carried on? Would I have got on this path? You know, because there's no doubt that music would always, I would always have loved music and enjoyed listening to it and enjoyed going to gigs. But it's hard to say, you know. I think moments like that, when you go to your first concert or you meet someone, or they're very, very important moments of your life that completely, because, you know, I'm a little 11-year-old kid, and really at that point, all I was really interested in was Star Wars, the A-Team, playing football with my mates, and then suddenly all it took was one night to suddenly, boom, I'm going in this direction.
It's like a bolt of lightning, really.
Yeah, it was almost like a really weird kind of like almost like a religious thing where it's just like boom, that this is now where I'm going, and but we speak a lot about it, and my mum, she remembers it fondly, and she like I said, she actually enjoyed the gig as well, which is great. But she's always been massively supportive of what I've been doing.
When was the last time they saw you live?
That's been a long time.
Yeah.
So I'd love them to come and see anything that I do, really. But yeah, they're kind of getting on now. My mum and dad are getting quite old, so whether they will actually get out to see me, I don't really know. But
they get to see the videos and stuff like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, they get to see the videos, and they very much follow me. I'm always sending them stuff, whether it's magazines that we've been in or whatever. And they're both. I mean, my mum's always been massively proud of me, but my dad is as well now, which is great. And he's got this kind of new appreciation, which I never thought he would have, because like I said, when I was growing up, he was very against what I wanted to do. Now he's bragging to his mates down the pub about
that's brilliant,
going to Japan and doing this, and which is something that I never thought would ever happen. So it's quite nice now, really, and I have a really good relationship with my dad now. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, but I think it all, like I said, it all started with that Europe concert. So
when was the last time you went home?
The last time I went home was actually right at the weekend that everything was closed down. I actually went up. I think it was Mother's Day, and we went up. I think it's March the 22nd, and I remember being in we were actually in the pub on a Friday night when they were actually that evening they were closing all the pubs down. So we're quite lucky in that, we got up there just as just before lockdown really sort of kicked in. So I saw my parents then for the weekend, but I've unfortunately not seen them since. So that was the last time I was up there. I'm really hoping fingers crossed, over the next few weeks, if things get lifted a bit more, I'll be able to get up there and see them, because it's long overdue.
Do you have good feelings when you go back up there?
Yeah, I do now. Like I said earlier, for a long time I kind of didn't want anything to do with it. Didn't particularly want to go back and visit, apart from seeing my mum and dad. But now when I go back, I have a completely different view on it, and I go to a lot of places that I used to go to when I was a kid, and there's a lot of happy memories attached to, like the park, like the local park, various places where me and my mates used to have a den there for years, and I've got all these nice memories now. Even some, the odd pub or two that I enjoyed going in when I was sort of in my sort of 16, 17-year-old period. And I have a lot of, I often go and kind of see past where my grandma and granddad used to live and stuff like that. And I have got a real warm feeling now for the place that I never had before. So again, I don't know whether it's just a case of getting old. I
think it's just a transition of time, isn't it? Over 20 years or something like that, you have no need for all the bad, let's call them bad memories, or things that got you down and stuff, all the negative, let's call it more negative stuff. You can just remember the good stuff, really.
Yeah, it is. I think I've kind of like, and when I was younger, I was so self-obsessed with just what I wanted to do, and just that wasn't, that little time that I came from it was not going to help me in any way to become successful as a musician or a rock star, whatever.
But perhaps it was the best thing, because it gave you that drive.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's sort of it's sort of kind of kept me, especially coming from there as well, because especially when you come from the north of England, there's just no bullshit at all. People just, it's that classic phrase, they call a spade, and so there's no. If someone has something to say to you, they'll say it, and they don't. Like my dad, he just, whatever he wants to say, he says it. It doesn't matter who he offends, whether he's politically correct. I mean, he'll just say something in the middle of the pub because that's how he feels, and that's how people are up there. So
Did you used to get drunk and stand up in the middle of a pub? I'll tell
Not
you.
quite.
I'll tell you.
Yeah, I'll tell you what's going on. Yeah. Not quite that, but there have been moments where I've said to him, you can't say that. And he's like, oh, why not? Why not? And he's got a good point, but that's just how people are up there. They're very, they just say whatever they think, and it's, so in a way, I think it's kind of, the point I was getting to was it's kind of kept me grounded in a way, because if I'd come back from doing something really cool, like, when I came back from, like, when we did Japan last year, if I'd gone back all sort of, walking around like, I just got back from 2 sold out gigs in Japan, it just would not wash, because people just do, number one, they don't care. And number two, they like my dad did, the first thing he said when I saw them not long afterwards, and he said, how was Japan? And I said, oh, it was amazing, and told him this long story. And then he was like, oh yeah, well, our boiler packed in last week. And it's suddenly, instantly, this kind of like amazing story I've just told about this lifelong dream, it's suddenly all over, and now we're talking about the boiler that needs fixing. So it just completely will always keep me like grounded. I could never, not that I would do, but I could never ever be, giving it the big I am, because it just wouldn't, especially would not wash in a place like Chorley,
Amazing. I love it. That's good. That's a good thing to end on, for sure. Thank you for doing this, dude.
Brilliant.
Here comes the weekend. Here comes the party. Here comes the moment that you've all invited. Here comes the weekend. There goes the neighborhood. Here comes the night when it all goes down, yeah.
There he was, Rob Wylde, Midnight City and TIGERTAILZ. That was a fun one, and thanks, Rob, for being so open. One of my favourite Wylde stories, we didn't speak about it in the chat, but it happened the night TCC played our last show. We all went out for some drinks in town later that night, and if you know Rob, you'll know that after a few beers he gets like really serious and wants to talk deeply about stuff, no matter how loud it is in the bar, or how drunk you all are, or how crazy things are around you. And we ended up in some bar in Nottingham, and he dived right in. He was like, I'm done with it, mate. I've tried so hard with this band to fit in. I cut my hair, tried to write songs a certain way, but I'm done with it. I gotta be honest with myself. I'm just gonna form a band with dudes with long hair and just play old school melodic hard rock. I don't care if it's in fashion or not. And fair play, that's what he did, and it's paid off. It's just an example of how staying true to yourself is the way to go, and if you do that and stick to your guns, you will succeed. So yeah, I'm stoked for how well he's doing right now. So that's it, episode 2 in the bag. Keep in touch, and I will be speaking to you all real soon. Thanks as always. Peace.